term miracle is thrown around in common day vernacular quite a bit. That shot was a miracle. It will take you a miracle to pass that test. It's a miracle that your cancer is in remission. What these people are communicating often seems clear enough. These events are either improbable events or some sort of divine intervention. I even find myself using the term improperly more often than not. However, there is an important distinction between the common usage of the term miracle and the actual conceptual nature of a miracle. And it is this second sense that has been debated for several centuries by some of the most intellectual powerhouses philosophy has seen. When we actually think about the inherent concept of a miracle, important preliminary questions instantly emerge. Are miracles possible? Are they probable? Are they definable? Are they distinguishable from natural events? It is not surprising that many individuals take issue with the notion of miracles in our world today. William Lane Craig generalizes this sentiment specifically to the Christian faith when he writes, quote, "Undoubtedly, one of the major stumbling blocks to becoming a Christian for many people today is that Christianity is a religion of miracles. It asserts that God became incarnate in Jesus of Nazareth, and that having died by crucifixion, he rose from the dead. But the problem is that these sorts of miraculous events seem to belong to a worldview foreign to modern man. A pre-scientific, superstitious worldview belonging to the individuals of the Middle Ages," end quote. In addition to this fear of falling prey into superstitious thinking and gullibility, we have perhaps an even more fundamental issue with miracles. That is, what exactly is a miracle in the first place? How do we even define such a concept? Different definitions abound, some quite reasonable, while others are extremely poor. Consider the following 4 definitions of a miracle. The second edition of the Cambridge Dictionary of Philosophy defines a miracle as, quote, "an extraordinary event brought about by God. A miracle is then a violation of a law of nature by God," end quote. Consider a second definition by C.S. Lewis, quote, "Before the naturalists and the supernaturalists can begin to discuss their differences of opinion, they must surely have an agreed definition both of nature and supernature. But unfortunately it is almost impossible to get such a definition," end quote. Lewis goes on to note that the naturalist defines nature as a single total reality, whilst the supernaturalist views nature as the framework of space and time and the procession of systematic connected events which fulfill in them, but also hold in tandem that there might be another system in addition to the one we call nature. This distinction is helpful, but I still believe we can do better here. In my opinion, the next 2 definitions fostered by Michael Licona and the McGrews are right on the money. Licona states that, quote, "By a miracle, I am referring to an event in history for which natural explanations are inadequate. That is not to say that there could still be a natural explanation that has yet to be discovered. It is to say that the nature of the event itself is such that there couldn't be no natural cause," end quote. The McGrews corroborate this definition when they write, quote, "For our purposes, it is sufficient to stipulate that a miracle is a specific event that could not have happened if only the natural order had been operating, where the natural order is understood to involve physical entities, their interactions, and the actions and interactions of animals, humans, and beings with the powers like our own," end quote. In each of these definitions, we note that a miracle is an event that would not be possible given the natural order and natural explanations that come forth from this order. Thus, for the sake of being explicit, when I use the term miracle, I will be focusing and using it in the sense that the McGrews use. With this done, the thesis of this series will be as follows. Miracles, as defined, are possible events, which are identifiable and distinguishable from natural events, whose validity can be investigated by reason and historical inquiry. In other words, I'm stating that miracles are possible, identifiable, and researchable via historical inquiry and reason. With this said, it seems that I'm going to have my work cut out for me. Now, before I frame the argument a little bit, I think it's important to organize all the prerequisites that need to be addressed first. It is here that we would be wise to take the advice of C.S. Lewis on this subject. He writes in his work Miracles, quote, "Many people think one can decide whether a miracle occurred in the past by examining the evidence according to the ordinary rules of historical inquiry. But the ordinary rules cannot be worked until we have decided whether miracles are possible, and if so, how probable they are. If miracles are possible but immensely improbable, then only mathematical demonstrative evidence will convince us. And since history never provides that degree of evidence for any event, history can never convince us that a miracle occurred. If, on the other hand, miracles are not intrinsically improbable, then the existing evidence will be sufficient to convince us. The result of our historical inquiries thus depend on the philosophical views which we have been holding before we even begin to look at the evidence. The philosophical question must come first," end quote. Lewis rightly points out that we must first discuss the possibility of miracles before we move to their probability, and finally the ability of historical investigation to discover them. In light of all this, I plan on formulating this series in the following manner. First, I would like to discuss the possibility of identifying a miracle. That is, how can a miracle be distinguished from the natural order? And follow up with a discussion on the burden of proof of miracle claims. Second, I would like to discuss the ample objections made by Hume and Spinoza on the possibility of miracles, and conclude these objections from Hume and Spinoza to be unpersuasive at times and fallacious. Third, I will briefly discuss the probability of miracles, and finally I will end with a discussion on the history's ability to research miracle claims, and conclude that historical investigation, along with logical reasoning, allow for said investigations to occur. Succinctly, given the definition of a miracle in this video, the criteria of identification to come, the possibility and workable probability of miracles, and the ability of history to research miracle claims, we have good grounds to believe that miracles are possible, and that they are discoverable. In the next section, we will begin our discussion on the identification of miracles and the burden of proof with miracle claims. And with that said, let the series begin.